Hi guys, it's Narelle Cook from Canine Pharmaceuticals, and welcome to another week of Thursday's Thoughts. This is where I share bite-sized pieces of scientific information that I find interesting, and I hope you do too. So this week we're looking at endocrine disrupting chemicals and how they might be affecting our pet dogs and cats. So this review paper was published in 2023 in the Animals Journal. So firstly, endocrine organs are different organs throughout the body that secrete hormones into the bloodstream, and they act as messengers to other parts of the body, basically. So think about things like the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, the adrenal glands, the kidneys, the pancreas, the testes, the ovaries. They're all endocrine organs. And endocrine disrupting chemicals are any chemicals that can disrupt or block or basically interfere with the functioning of the endocrine organs in the body and the functions that they provide. Now, pet dogs and cats, they can be exposed to EDCs through indoor and outdoor sources. They can ingest them, inhale them, absorb them through their skin. However, diet is considered the primary source of EDCs, so endocrine disrupting chemicals, in our pets. And really sad, like we've known about the negative health consequences of EDCs in humans for a while now, and unfortunately we're now seeing the same health disorders in our pets that we've been seeing in humans. So, thyroid and reproductive disorders, diabetes, heart and kidney disease, and, various types of cancer. So that's not good. There's hundreds of different chemicals are considered EDCs. I'm not going to go through all of these in details, but it's a really interesting paper and we'll link it to the post. But one that I really wanted to highlight here, so naturally occurring xenoestrogens are a type of EDC. So these are chemicals that are structurally or functionally similar to mammalian estrogen, so whether that's us or our pet dogs and cats. So these xenoestrogens can be produced naturally by plants, in which case they're called phytoestrogens, or fungi, in which case they're called mycoestrogens. And both of these have been thought to be harmful to animals when consumed in contaminated feed. Now, what does that mean for our pets? The main mycoestrogen is one that I'll just use the abbreviation ZEA. It's a really potent xenoestrogen that's produced by some fungi or mold. It's heat stable and it's found worldwide in cereal grains. So things like maize, barley, oats, wheat, rice, and sorghum. So if you think about, they're really, really common ingredients in a lot of commercial kibble, and the quality of those grains in kibble is, definitely subpar. A lot of, whatever doesn't go to the human food chain will go to generally the pet food chain and will often be moldy. So most studies that have looked at mold contamination and mycotoxin contamination in commercial pet foods, a very high percentage are contaminated. So soy is the richest source of phytoestrogen as well. So they're saying that these xenoestrogens can exert a wide-ranging estrogenic effects by mimicking or blocking endogenous hormones, etc. Again, the main source is food, but, furniture, carpets, paints, varnishes, water can all be contributing. They're actually saying it's really concerning that, the levels of EDCs that are now being detected in both dry and wet foods, given, how the pet food market is growing, these days. This is just, again, back on to the soy and the phytoestrogens and the ZEA contamination, just saying that, dry dog foods contain larger amounts of cereals and are a common source of contamination of mycotoxins. We really need to think about phthalates and BPA. So if your dog is chewing on plastic toys or you're using a plastic food bowl or a plastic water bowl, that's a major source of EDCs, unfortunately. And, a lot of the plastic chew toys that we buy in the pet stores are coming from countries where we really don't know what's in them. So it's not just EDCs, there's the potential for heavy metals and a lot of other toxic compounds that our dogs will be ingesting through just the regular licking and chewing of those toys. Plastic food bowls Never, ever, ever, ever for yourself or your pet heat anything in plastic. Like, do not put a plastic bowl in the microwave and heat your food or your pet's food. That is the worst for leaching EDCs into the food. But even plastic water bowls, it's not as quick, but over time, plastic will absolutely leach. Those EDCs from the plastic will leach into the water as well. And look, we've known about this for a while in terms of children. Like toddlers like to chew on things and, always have something in their mouth. So there's been quite tight regulations about, what types of plastics are allowed in like toddler toys and things like that. But unfortunately, the same level of regulation just isn't in place when it comes to our pets and their health. That's just more sources. So this whole next section is about the negative effects of exposure to EDCs in our pets. And one of the main ones is reproductive disorders. Now this, again, if you are a breeder, you should absolutely be all over this and educating yourself about all of the possible sources of EDCs that may be contributing to your pet's health, because the evidence is really clear in humans. And again, unfortunately, we're seeing the same trends now in dogs, but significant reductions in sperm count, sperm viability. I think they've now found that the same trend we're seeing in dogs. So dogs that live in a human household, there's been a 30% decline in sperm motility over the last nearly 30 years. So really significant if you're a breeder. So that's in terms of the males, if you've got a stud. But that ZEA, or that mycoestrogen found in particularly kibble, can also affect the female reproductive organs. So they've shown that exposure to low doses of that ZEA mycotoxin have been linked with uterine dysfunction and has frequently led to the spontaneous endometritis pyometra complex. Oh my goodness, that shouldn't have been so hard to say. But just not good for our females, not good for our males. And there was a study done investigating the outcome of a breeding program of assistance dogs, and they reported a correlation between the altered sex ratio in litters in favour of females, because a lot of these EDCs, because of the way they're working on hormones, lead to more feminization, oh my goodness, and a decline in semen quality in the stud dogs related to the exposure to chemical contaminants. So just crazy. Thyroid disorders is really common as well, as a negative consequence of exposure to EDCs. And we see this a lot in cats. So feline hyperthyroidism, so overactive thyroid, is really common in cats. Dogs tend to have hypo or underactive thyroid. And one of the reasons, or some of the reasons that they suggest this is the case, is because cats, they're constantly grooming themselves, and a lot of EDCs will fall out of the atmosphere, for example, into house dust. So because cats are always walking around and lying on the floor, they're getting covered in house dust that we can't see, but it's there, and they're ingesting that like all day, every day, and that's one reason. But also cats tend to be fed canned food. So they're saying, a lot of the EDC chemicals that are present in canned foods in particular could very well be, the reason that we're seeing so much like overactive thyroid disease in our pet cats. I won't go through all that. So look, it's just really scary. And it's not that we can avoid these chemicals. We can't, like they're just ubiquitous in the environment, but we can certainly sort of try and be smart about what we do in terms of the type of bowls that we use for our dogs for food and water, the type of packaging that we keep things in, the type of toys that we give our dogs, the type of bedding, the type of furnishing, how we clean our homes, using a HEPA air filter potentially in the house, making sure, the house is well aired. Sorry guys, vacuuming is super important, to regularly vacuum to sort of minimize that sort of burden of house dust. And in terms of, so they're sort of environmental things. In terms of what we could do from an internal health perspective, just supporting our dog's gut health, because we know gut's connected to everything, and has a really strong connection to immune function. So something like the Gut Protect to support gut and immune health will be great. I would absolutely be recommending the pure milk thistle to make sure that liver function is optimal and those detoxification pathways are working well. Similar to that, the organic super greens would be a great choice for general health and well-being on a daily basis. But if you've got any questions or concerns about this topic and how it might be relating to your dog, please reach out to us at info@canineceuticals.com.au and let me know in the comments. I always love to hear your feedback. Is this something you've come across before and you've made changes and you've noticed health improvements in your dog, or have you sort of discovered negative health consequences and pinpointed it back to something from the environment? Love to hear your stories. But otherwise, thank you for another week of Thursday's Thoughts, and I'll see you next week.